So joining me today is Ann Coulter's niece, Kimberly Coulter. I do think it's silly to introduce someone that way, but it actually plays into what we're going to be talking about. So I know several people who know you, Kimberly, and the other day someone said they were freaking out, like, "Oh my God, Kimberly got fired for supporting Alex Jones and free speech," and it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I definitely want to start this off by saying I don't want to definitively say, and I don't think you do either, that you were fired for supporting free speech, but it seems like it's leaning in that direction. And the reason why I think this conversation is a good one to have is because whether or not we can definitively prove you got fired from your job for speaking up in defense of, free speech, it's something that does happen often. We see a lot of people, people. There was one woman who tweeted recently in response to Alyssa Milano, like she divorced her husband for being a Trump supporter. And so, right, we see this absolute division. So when someone says to me, I had a conversation with some employees, some coworkers, we talked about free speech, and then all of a sudden I get a text message that I'm fired. I'm like, so let's go over what happened. You were working for a company in good standing.
Yeah, well, okay, so I had recently been hired by this company, and I'm not gonna, I don't want to make a big thing about the company because I'm not gonna pursue charges or anything like that. I don't think it's to that degree. I just think it's important to have this dialogue about it. So I'd been working there for, I want to say, a couple months, almost two, and I hadn't been really late without calling in. I was picking up extra hours. I was getting along with my coworkers. Things were going well overall. And I got into I started bringing up Stop the Bias, because if you follow me on Twitter, and on Instagram or Facebook or wherever, I'm a big advocate for free speech. And I believe that the Stop the Bias movement is something that deserves the attention, that as much attention as possible. And most of my coworkers didn't even really know what Stop the Bias was. So I was able to kind of start a dialogue a little bit between people. And then the name Alex Jones came up, and one of my younger coworkers proclaimed he should be killed. And she was talking in reference to the Sandy Hook situation. And my response to that was, I can't believe that in a situation where we're talking about the horrendous nature of children getting massacred, you're talking about how it's on the other side totally okay if someone comes and murders Alex Jones because of the way that he chose to go about that journalistically, even though at this point he's come out and apologized for a lot of those statements that she was talking about.
Well, we can stop right now and say, listen, you don't have to like Alex Jones. You can detest Alex Jones. But calling to physically hurt somebody, like end their life, to me, that's like the rhetoric is getting so absolutely insane. So
people
it's kind
are brainwashed. Yeah.
I mean, you can accuse people of being brainwashed over like any different issue, but to advocate for, to wish for harm against someone else, I wouldn't. I advocate the opposite. No, let's have a conversation.
Exactly.
But then it's interesting that you're in an environment where your coworkers would say something like that. I'd be interested to hear if that person would be fired for, wishing death upon someone else. I don't think they should be. I'm just,
No, absolutely
you
not.
ended up getting fired.
I was going to say, but I'm the one who ended up getting fired. And if we're going to talk about the merit of which comment deserved to be reprimanded, I would say that I would be on the winning side of that debate. But the fact of the matter is, I don't understand how I'm supposed to live in a society where I can't express discomfort with a statement about someone being murdered without potentially outing myself as conservative leaning and making myself a pariah. And what in the world does that have to do with my ability to sit behind a counter and work a cash register?
So basically, you get a text message shortly after this where
what happened? Okay, so they kind of used the opportunity that I had a bad lower back spasm, and I decided to come into I got my work covered for the one day, and I came into work the next day. Just I'm trying to tough it out. I try to do that in most situations because I don't want to miss work. And midway through, I was kind of buckling at the knees. It was really a lot. So I asked if I can run around the corner. There's an urgent care, and to see if they'll give me some 600 milligram ibuprofen or something. And they ended up holding me. So I stayed there. I sent the letter that they gave me to my boss, explaining like, this is why I'm not at work. I texted everybody to see if I could get covered, and the people who were working, sent me a nice reply, hey, we're good. If you need to stay, you need to stay. Not a big deal. Went through every proper channel. And then the following day, one of my coworkers sends me a message along the lines of, what's going on? I don't see your name on the schedule. And I don't know. This is only speculation. I can only say from my educated guess. But the fact is, if I hadn't texted my boss saying, hey, like, I'm feeling a lot better, I'm ready to come back to work, you can throw me on the schedule. Is there a chance you didn't email it out already? Is there a reason like I'm not on it? And he sent me the reply that I showed you, which basically was along the lines of, you're not we're sorry to say you're not a right fit. You're not the right fit for this position, and good luck on your podcast and future endeavors.
So so I definitely want to make sure we clarify, and it's why I'm going to title this with a question mark. You can only speculate, and I think when I first heard what happened, it was very hyperbolic. Like, we have a mutual friend being like, "Oh my God, she was fired for defending Alex Jones," but then it's actually more nuanced than that. Of course, it's entirely possible you have a crappy boss, and he was like, "I don't want to deal with someone who's got a hurt back." But
that's definitely true.
But that sounds like, here's the thing, again, we can only guess. I would lean towards, it sounds like they didn't like you, because if somebody hurts their back one day and needs to get medication, that doesn't seem like a fireable offense. In fact, firing someone for being hurt on the job in this capacity seems weird and unreasonable. At the very least, we can say you worked for someone very weird and unreasonable. But then you mentioned that you had like awkward exchanges following this conversation about your political beliefs. And it sounds like maybe they just wanted to, shoo you along and not work with someone like you. And so we'll transition the conversation in this way to clarify. Based on what you've heard, for those that are listening, you decide if you think it's actually as egregious as it really is. But the reason I bring this, I find this interesting, is just because of cancel culture as a whole. Like I mentioned, there was some woman who tweeted she divorced her Trump-supporting husband. We saw a story, I believe it was in The Atlantic, where it talked about married couples getting into fights over their differing political beliefs, and we're actually seeing we're seeing this ridiculous divide where, I mean, if you even walk outside wearing a Trump hat, people will accuse you of the worst things. They'll splash drinks in your face, they'll knock it off your head, they'll attack you. There was a viral video a few weeks ago where some Koreans were just walking down the street wearing Trump hats, and some guys came up and ripped them off their heads and threw them on the ground, started stomping on them. And I saw this behavior in San Jose in I believe it was 2016, where they knocked an elderly couple to the ground. This crowd of anti-Trump protesters set their hats on fire, and to me that was insane. Like, I had never seen young protesters attack old people. So I think it for me, I have my personal bias. When I see all these things happening, when I see like 800 plus instances of harassment and suspensions and censorship, and then I hear your story, I lean towards, I'm willing to bet that your supervisor, heard that, wait a minute, who is this? Your last name is Coulter?
Yeah.
So let's segue in this way. Your last name is Coulter. Have you faced discrimination because of because of Anne?
Oh, undeniably throughout my entire life. I was, actually this really came to resonate with me. Last night I was watching Soph, and it suddenly triggered some memories. It was like, I used to have a lot of the same opinions as her at the same age. And those were kind of, subsequently beaten out of me, in the sense that like, I was more susceptible to people's opinions of me very clearly, at least from what I'm able to glean from myself in retrospect. And when I would, I used to be the little girl that would run up to people in the park when I saw them reading an Ann Coulter book and proudly proclaim, "That's my aunt, I'm so proud of her." And it went from that to me developing this defensive coping mechanism when people would bring up that she was my aunt, and I would immediately go, "Oh no, I'm adopted. I'm adopted."
Are you adopted?
I am adopted, actually.
Oh, there you go.
So, and it was just like teachers, parents of friends, even, people that I associated with as we started to get a little bit older and started to understand politics a little bit, or try to pretend that we did. I would get a lot of, "Oh, you don't believe, oh, sweetie, you don't believe what Anne does, do you? Because that would mean that you're a bigot, and that would mean that you're a Nazi, and that would mean that you don't like gay people, and you're just a sexist bigot, and how can you defend your family when they come from this place of hate? And of course, as a young child, and especially as someone with adoption issues, I want to be accepted and I want to be liked, and I don't want to be seen in a negative light. So my immediate defense mechanism is, well, obviously I'm not a bigot, so I guess I don't believe in her, and I guess I don't like her. And I spent a lot of my adolescence kind of thinking that she was something that she wasn't, and I really do regret that in retrospect.
Yeah, peer pressure. But I mean, at the same time, my understanding is you're what are you, kind of like a moderate or a centrist? How would you describe yourself?
Yeah,
Some conservative views, some liberal.
I definitely would say, I mean, it still kind of makes me feel cringy because I don't know, I can't honestly answer for myself whether or not I hold on to the centrist label because I'm terrified of what would come if I was to fully come out as a conservative. Because the fact is, I do have liberal views, but I have more conservative views now than ever before because I've been able to meet people like you and Lucian and
Well, I would argue towards the other side. But I'm like a moderate.
I just mean people who in the public eye are viewed as controversial. I'm able to meet these people like Milo. When I met Milo and I posted a picture of me and him hanging out, I got a slew of messages from people that on the left who are my friends. How dare you? How are your Jewish friends supposed to feel? What's wrong with you? I've been thrown out of, I made a video where I was thrown out of a Juno car because I was listening to Ali's podcast. I've gotten into friendship ending arguments because I have even so much as indicated that I might agree with something conservative. So I have like a deep-seated fear that because I started to agree more and I started to see more logic in the conservative argument, that I'm going to be a social pariah, and I barely have started a career.
And here's what we need, right? So I did a live show kind of like this with David Pakman, and he spends the first 15 minutes or so questioning my political beliefs based on the direction of my content. And I'm fine with that. I'm willing to have a conversation with literally anybody. If you want to just come at me, I will. I've got nothing to hide. And the issue is, hey, there are things I think are important, and I'm like a moderate, centrist, center-left individual. So yeah, I'm not going to constantly make anti-Trump videos. But what we need is, we need publicly visible people who are willing to say, oh, I absolutely have some conservative views and some liberal views, whatever. That way it gives space to other people to feel like they're not going to be excised from society. You look at how they ban people, and it scares people. And that's not going to create a healthy society if people have anxiety all the time over not being able to, look, conservatives who are getting banned feel like they're fighting for what's right. Obviously, liberals think they're fighting for what's right. One side right now is being suppressed more so, right? Obviously, the anti-war left gets beaten down all the time. But what we would consider like the mainstream culture of social media online, not like your average American Democrat, like the woke media, they can say whatever they want and get away with it. They can be racist bigots all day and night. They can advocate open racism, like we see where they, right now there's a story I'm looking at where they're, with affirmative action and adversity scores they're doing, where they claim all Asians are the same race. And it's mind-blowing to me to imply that Indian people and Filipinos are the same race. It's like, it's absurd. And they get away with it. For years you have Sarah Jong posting racist stuff, they get away with it. So what happens then when you have conservatives who say, I want to speak up and defend what I feel is right, and they get banned from social media? You are creating a very, very angry and anxious society. So, I guess my idea there, and then I'll throw it back to you, is I feel like if, maybe I do this by being kind of like a moderate center-left type on a lot of issues. I'm pro-choice. I believe in a living wage. I won't get into all that stuff, but it gives room to people who are like, look, if you want to have a conservative view, I'm not going to shame you. By all means, let's talk about it. And this can actually, I think, help society, help young people actually feel safe and feel okay talking about normal things. Because I'll end this thought on this right here. If 60 million people voted for the president, that's not a fringe minority. Those are regular people, right? So we need to be able to talk and not be scared of being destroyed, having our finances ruined, being banned from banks, social media shut down.
Yeah, well, I think an important part of this conversation is also establishing a baseline definition for what free speech actually is, because a lot of people are conflating free speech and censorship. It's free speech to be able to trying to think of a good example.
It's not free speech for someone standing in front of you.
No, it's not free speech for someone to stand in front of you and obstruct you from being able to listen to someone speak. In fact, that's not only impeding on your right to gather civilly, but it's also censoring what you came to listen to. So
The heckler's
people
veto.
have, yes, exactly.
That's actually complicated because that's also protected under the First Amendment. So for me, you know, if is it annoying and frustrating if, say, you know, Carl Benjamin, for instance, he was doing a speech at, I believe it was College of London, and protesters showed up and shut the event down. Well, that's a private event. That's well, actually, it might be public, but the point is, he had a room, it was dedicated to him, and people wanted to listen. Shutting him down in that regard, I think, crosses the line of, you know, either like disorderly conduct. If you're in public and you're speaking and someone blows an air horn, it's like, well, we got to figure out where that line is because you have a right to assembly. And, you know, I think the First Amendment covers a lot of really, really important things. But I do think the interesting debate on free speech is there is a line on free speech, right? Because you can't incite to violence, for instance.
Well,
So
that's what I'm saying. We're ignoring an entire group of people who are notorious for showing up to these events armed to the teeth and ready to kick in Nazi skulls, and we're patting them on the back. The mainstream media, the mainstream narrative of that is that kind of behavior is justified. We've painted certain individuals in a light where their rights don't matter because they're terrible people. And that's just not true. It doesn't make logical sense. And the only arguments that I hear from people is, oh, they're just evil people. And you got to look at the motive of somebody whose only complaint about another person is that they're solely evil, because no one is solely evil.
that's actually, I think that we can understand that idea through Jonathan Haidt's research, where he found that liberals tend to operate on two moral archetypes, and conservatives use all five, conservatives and moderates. And so they found that liberals could not predict how a conservative would behave, but conservatives and moderates could predict how a liberal would behave. And so that's why a lot of these left arguments are that conservatives are evil and morally wrong and things like that, because they don't actually try to understand. You know, they just assume you're evil and I'm the good guy.
Well, even further than that, you know, I'm sorry, I mean to
no, go ahead.
Even further than that, it is nothing to do with like, we want, like, they're evil and we're good. It's an entire the entire narrative that, like, you shouldn't listen to them only because they're evil, and you're not offering any substantial grounds for why they're evil beyond, oh, they're a Nazi, and that's just illogical.
It's actually like an attack, right? It's a long-standing propaganda technique to accuse, you know, someone of being the worst of the worst. And that just makes it impossible to actually have conversations. You know, I think in terms of the double standard, too, you can look at where was the national reporting when Antifa showed up to Portland and bashed a Bernie Sanders supporter over the head with a club? Non-existent. Where was the national reporting when the bike lock basher, you know, bashed 7 people over the head and then went to trial, and all of the story around it never happened? Yet here's the really funny thing I find. They like to claim speech is violence, right? So you've got people in the UK protesting Sargon of Akkad, Carl Benjamin, holding up signs saying speech equals violence. Yet at the same time, when I believe his name is Mark Pitkovich, he works with the Anti-Defamation League, tweeted that Antifa flooded the law office of someone who represented ICE, and that was extremism, they said, destroying property is not violence. His response was, tell that to the black community when their churches are being burned down, and they said, property destruction is not violence. So let's parse this. You have these people simultaneously arguing destroying a church in the black community is not violent, but saying mean words is violent. And this shows us the inherent double standard. There is no principle. There is no morality. They will they'll claim, oh, violence is bad, speech is violence. Then someone throws a milkshake at the face of Carl, and they mock it, they laugh it, they encourage it, and they say, bring it on, it's funny. So there's clearly no principle there. It's pure tribalism, and it's all about the quote I often use is not a direct reference to religion, but God is on my side. And what that really means, in the way I see it, is they think they're morally superior regardless of what they do.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with you on that point.
So you're not Ann Coulter. You're her niece.
No, I'm not. I'm very much not Ann Coulter. There's definitely a lot that she would still probably very much not like about my lifestyle.
So I know that we'll wrap this up with where we started. You talked about how you were advocating Stop the Bias, the movement to protect speech and stop censorship. I guess just for who you are, for what you do, for where you've come from, for the kind of the bias against you, for who your family is. What do you think is going to happen, and what are you hoping Stop the Bias could accomplish?
Well, I'm just hoping that we as a society can openly acknowledge, no matter what platform you stand on, no matter what agenda you want to push, that we all deserve the right to be able to peacefully and with a certain understanding of safety be able to express our opinions. There's a difference between censorship and free speech, and people need to understand that just because you are led to believe that a certain narrative is dangerous doesn't mean that they don't deserve the right to be able to, you don't deserve to be able to see what they have to say. It's not free speech to bang on tables and protest saying the Pledge of Allegiance, for example. It's a form of censorship. I feel as though I want Stop the Bias to create the ideal political landscape, which is, a situation like this. Me and you, we sit across from each other and we have a conversation. And if I say something that you don't like, you challenge it and you say, hey, I don't agree with you because of this. And I know that that's a very baseline example, but the fact is we don't have that in our society right now. We don't have a safe environment for people communicating different ideas because there's such a bipartisan between the two parties. And if you're not on the side if you're not on the same side, that means you're supposed to be adversarial. And that is
right.
A scary world to live in.
Right. And that's why I think a lot of people like the intellectual dark web types. As much as it's really funny. There was a tweet from Dave the other day that it really ticked me off. Dave's trying to interview Pete Buttigieg, and I believe he is going to interview Andrew Yang. And all of a sudden, you get these woke journalists saying, essentially, "Oh no, don't do it. Whoa, oh God." And it's like, these are people who don't like Dave because Dave doesn't interview the left. Then when Dave reaches out to Democrats to do an interview with them, they try and stop it from happening. Like, how does that make sense? And of course, their defense was, oh, but Pete Buttigieg isn't really the left. No, you're basically saying that you're going to obstruct Dave Rubin because you want him to platform your people. You're right. There's no safe place to have these conversations. And so they go after Dave, Dave's not perfect, right? But the point is, at least he's having some conversations. He's not going to platform who you want on a platform. But I think this is what we need. We need conversations like this. Like I said, I'm willing to talk to anybody. So Sam Cedar, Kyle Kalinske, David Pakman, I don't care. By all means, let's have a conversation. But we'll wrap it up there. I don't want to beat a dead horse. But do you have any final thoughts you want to add before we sign off? You want to mention your social media or something?
Sure. If you guys want to follow me on Instagram, you can follow me at Coulter Culture, COULTERCULTURE. You can find me on Instagram and on Twitter, and keep an ear to the ground for the release of my podcast, The Ladies Room, brought to you by Culture.com.
Cool. And for everybody else, I'll just say this. I don't even know where I'm going to be uploading this because I have the two channels. I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing with my main channel and my second channel. And this might go on my main channel. I might do something else. I really don't know. But I'll say this. You can support my work over at timcast.com/donate. And the podcast I do every day is now being expanded to essentially all of my content. So it's over an hour long now. But other than that, Kimberly, thanks for the conversation. Thanks for hanging out. Everybody else.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all next time.
All right. Thanks, Tim.